In 1969, I moved to El Reno, Oklahoma, and preached there for a while. And I preached a sermon, I remember one Sunday, on the kind of preaching we need today, using people like Jeremiah, Isaiah, Elijah, John the Baptist, fearless men. And a man came out who was visiting, and he shook my hand and said that was one of the grandest sermons he'd ever heard. Later on, we moved to Chillicothe, Texas, and I preached there for a while, and finally we moved back to Elk City, where this man who had visited in 1969 lived. And he was a deacon in the church there at Elk City. And there was an uproar at Elk City because that congregation had allowed a liberal group to take over. They ran off their preacher. They didn't run him off. He left, but he suffered the slings and arrows of a lot of ungodliness. And I happened to be his associate, and so that it fell to me to get into the pulpit and preach after he was gone. And in the course of that time, for a few months that I was there, I preached that sermon, the kind of preaching we need today. The very same sermon I had preached some 8 years before that, 7 or 8 years, at El Reno, and the man who was the deacon there at Elk City thought that was a grand sermon. After I preached it at Elk City, he got all huffed up and puffed up and marched out and accused Bill Craig of telling me what to preach there at Elk City. Now, I hadn't changed the sermon. It's the same sermon. Who changed? That's what's happened among churches. Churches have changed. Listen, I know most of you, brethren, well enough to know you haven't changed the message. What you're preaching is the same old gospel that you preached years ago, just like I do. Somebody's changed, and they've not changed for the better. My topic is the church in Sardis. Revelation chapter 3, verses 1 through 6. And unto the angel of the church in Sardis write, These things saith he that hath the 7 spirits of God and the 7 stars. I know thy works, that thou hast a name that thou livest, and art dead. Be watchful and strengthen the things which remain that are ready to die, for I have not found thy works perfect before God. Remember therefore how thou hast received and heard, and hold fast and repent. If therefore thou shalt not watch, I will come on thee as a thief, and thou shalt not know what hour I will come upon thee. Thou hast a few names even in Sardis, which have not defiled their garments, and they shall walk with me in white, for they are worthy. He that overcometh, the same shall be clothed in white raiment, and I will not blot out his name out of the book of life, but I will confess his name before my Father and before his angels. He that hath an ear to hear, let him hear what the Spirit saith unto the churches. And I think you've noticed that is the final admonition of these letters. He that hath an ear to hear, let him hear. In other words, take heed. Jesus said of the people in his day This people's heart is waxed gross, and their ears are dull of hearing, the eyes they've closed, lest at any time they should see with their eyes, hear with their ears, and understand with their hearts, should be converted, and I should heal them. That's what hearing means. Understanding. And what he's saying here, not only he that hath an ear, not a physical ear, this is a spiritual ear. Let him hear, let him understand. You better understand what the Spirit is saying unto the churches. According to Brother Foy Wallace, he said the history of the city of Sardis, this is from his commentary on Revelation. He signed that for me in 1970. And he told me when he signed it, he said, this book represents 40 years of study. He said, when I debated Neil in Kentucky on millennialism, he said, I didn't know what Revelation meant. But I knew it didn't mean what they said it meant. And he debated him. And that began his study of the book of Revelation. And he wrote his great commentary on it. Brother Wallace signed that for me. And he said in his commentary, the history of the city of Sardis had been one of splendor, but it was generally known at this time to be in a state of decadence and decay. The Lord used this condition of the city to impress the spiritual state of the church. They had a name like the city in which they were situated, but they were spiritually dead. The religious history of Sardis, like the civil, was in the past. Let that sink in just a little bit. Arthur Ogden, who also wrote a fine commentary on Revelation called The Avenging of the Apostles and Prophets, and I like Brother Ogden's too. He said this. He said it was a busy center for trade and traffic. Sardis was. So, now listen, the decadence and decay that Brother Wallace talked about was probably from the material wealth brought by this commerce, much like the wealth of the United States, of Texas, and Oklahoma today. The world is soft. We're soft. People don't work like they used to. People have money. Even what the government calls the poorest of people in this country have money. They have food stamps. They have cell phones. They're not hurting. And they don't have to work. And farmers, my wife's cousin is a farmer. He told me. He farms his daddy and my wife's granddaddy's land. Plus a lot of others, probably about 1,200 acres. He said, farmers don't work anymore. We don't do manual labor. We have machines that do that. We live in a decadent society. Someone says, well, if we're so rich, how come it's decadent? Well, it's spiritually decadent. It's morally decadent. Our whole society is decadent because we have too much stuff. Just way too much stuff. And that was Sardis. And secular materialism like that and like we have today affects the church in any age. It affected it in Sardis. It's affecting the church in our country today. When churches are caught up, get this, in big programs, popular culture, be cool. Get you a cool youth minister so he can be cool and attract young people and they can have food and fun and fellowship. Popular culture. Material thinking. When churches do that, they silence strong voices for the truth. They lose that which makes them strong voices for the truth. In the Lord's cause, they lose their spirituality. They especially become susceptible to compromise when their big programs take precedence over the mission of the church. My brethren, the mission of the church was stated in Matthew 16:15. Go ye into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature. Period. The mission of the church is not benevolence. The mission of the church is not edification. The mission of the church is to preach the gospel and save souls. Benevolence and benevolence and edification, yes. We do that. We do that at Northeast. We support, with the help of a lot of other brethren, we support 2 widows in Kenya. And from our own treasury, we help support 1 widow in our congregation. I'm not against benevolence. But that's not the mission of the church. The mission of the church is for us to preach the gospel in all the world, wherever we are, to save souls, to preach the gospel in order that men might be saved. And that's what the early church did. Bruce, I'll tell you where this happened. Where the preachers all stayed and the brethren left town. Acts 8:4. They that were scattered abroad went everywhere preaching the word. They were scattered from Jerusalem, but it said except the apostles. They stayed in Jerusalem. I don't guess that's ever happened since then, where the preachers have stayed and all the members have moved. But that's what happened. And what did these people do? Did they run and find lawyers? Did they move out and try to find a safe place? Did they get them some safety pins? No, what does it say? They that were scattered abroad went everywhere preaching the word. Amen. And that's exactly what you ought to do and I ought to do today. That's the mission of the church. But churches that forget that lose their spirituality. And that was true of the church in Sardis. Now, I want you to notice there's no rebuke of false doctrine at Sardis. Do you notice that? These other churches in Asia had false doctrine. Sardis didn't. We're not preaching false doctrine here. No. Just like a lot of churches today that won't preach false doctrine. But they won't preach the whole counsel of God. And they won't stand against false doctrine. It's one thing not to preach it. It's another thing to preach against it. A lot of them won't preach false doctrine, but they won't preach against it. You see, Sardis had a name. Thou hast a name. Verse 1. You see, Sardis was evidently known among brethren as a sound church, and I'm sure they were sound in teaching the doctrine of Christ. But that reputation was a facade. They were a dead church. Thou hast a name that thou livest. And the brethren all around were going, oh, have you seen what Sardis is doing? Oh, they're doing great things over Sardis. What are they doing? Well, they've got this big program going over there. They've got this one called Trunk or Treat. And on Halloween, you can take your kids up there, and the cars are parked or chariots in the parking lot, and they got the trunks raised. And take your kids up there, and they'll give you candy. Oh, they do. And they're bringing them in, and the kids love it. Sardis has a big name. Well, you know, Sardis had a preaching school. They've had this preaching school for years. Brother Hearn started this preaching school. They have a big name for this preaching school. But a big name, great works, cannot hide the fact that their spiritual strength was waning and nearly dead. Many churches today have a big name, But they're dead because they're in fellowship with error. There's no new thing under the sun. Solomon said it, and even if he hadn't said it, it's still true. There's no new thing under the sun. Today, there are among us churches like Sardis. They have a name because of their programs, and I'll name you one. Memphis School of Preaching. Over the years, from Brother Hearn onward, he did a fine work, great work. When it was Knight Arnold, now it's Forest Hill. Memphis School of Preaching is not the church. It's a work of the church, by the way. People need to be reminded that schools are not the church. And they have a name because of their signature work, which is MSOP, Forest Hill does. They're great preachers, good preachers, who've been there. We have some here, don't we, who were at Memphis. Good preachers, sound preachers, and they've turned out lots of sound preachers. But while they haven't preached error at Forest Hill, at least in the last few years, or up until maybe the last few years, they've compromised with error. The error of Dave Miller. Why? Who said it back there? Follow the money. Protect your name so the money will keep coming in. And we can't say anything about elder reevaluation and reaffirmation taught and practiced by Dave Miller and unrepented of to this day. We can't say anything about that. It's liable to hurt the school. And we can't hurt the school. We got to save the school. They're wedded to their programs. They're certainly not wedded to the church. They're not wedded to the truth. They're wedded to their programs. They have a name, and they got to uphold this name because of their programs. And that is probably no more clearly set forth than a diatribe from Keith Mosher at an open forum at the Sunny Slope Church in Paducah, Kentucky on July the 15th of 2006 when he replied to a question about MSOP's relationship with Dave Miller. Now I want you to notice this. The question was, could Brother Cates or Mosher clarify Memphis School of Preaching's relationship with Dave Miller? Now, Lester, if I ask you to clarify your relationship with Dave Miller, could you just give me an answer? That's pretty simple, wouldn't it? You wouldn't call me vile now, would you, for asking that question? No, okay. Well, first of all, Keith Mosher did not even touch the question top, side, or bottom. Wasn't there. Of course, Curtis Cates spoke too, and he didn't touch it either. Neither one of them answered the question. But they did make some attacks. And Mosher said, he said, quote, but these people, he's talking about those who question Memphis and question Dave Miller. He's talking about people who write about that. Where's David Brown? He's talking about people like David Brown. And here is what Mosher said, quote, but these people are as vile a group, and I do mean vile, as I have ever read after in my life. They want to destroy about 9 good works in the brotherhood just to prove a point. End quote. They wanted, I don't know what he's talking about. He didn't name the 9 what he called good works. I suppose one of them would have to be Memphis School of Preaching. But I don't know. But what's he defending? Well, I'm sure Apologetics Press would also be one of those works. What's he defending? He's defending works, not defending the truth, not defending the Bible, not defending the Lord's church. He would destroy the truth, the church, to save his works. Because they have a name. Got to uphold a name. Rather than answer the question, he just attacked the questioner. And I will share that with you. Read the question. He said, this question is a setup. All right, here's the question again. I want you to remember. The question was, would Brother Cates or Moser clarify MSOP's relationship with Dave Miller? Could you clarify that? Keith Moser said that question's a setup. That's like saying, do you still beat your wife? It is. Oh, really? Well, now, if it was not widely known that Memphis School of Preaching was in bed with Dave Miller, it would have been a setup question. But everybody knew then and knows now that Memphis School of Preaching fellowships Dave Miller. So how could it be a setup? How could it be a setup? A question like, do you still beat your wife? It'd be like saying, do you still fellowship Dave Miller? They didn't ask that. They said, would you clarify? Of course, he didn't answer it, and neither did Curtis Cates. So there are churches among us today like Sardis, chief of which is Forest Hill in Memphis, Tennessee. Verse 2, he said, be watchful and strengthen. Be watchful and strengthen the things that remain which are ready to die, for I have not found thy works perfect before God. Like Sardis, there are churches today which are spiritually dead but have some signs of life in a few members. Scattered among the churches that have compromised the truth in our day, there are doubtless many saints who are still alive, but will not be alive long without lifting their voices against the errors in those churches. In 1976, November, we left that big church in Elk City and established another congregation because of their liberalism. And I thought back, and I had relatives there, relatives who stayed there, aunts, cousins. And I knew most of the people there because I had gone there ever since I was 7 years old. And I've often thought about those people through the years. And I've had people say, well, you know, old brother so-and-so, he stayed there, but he doesn't believe that. Oh, he doesn't? Well, he's giving his money there every week. He's contributing. He's putting his money in the collection plate every week. He attends all the time. He helps support their preacher. He does all these things. But he doesn't believe that? Well, then he must be quite a hypocrite. Must be quite a liar. In my mother's family, there were 7 children, and all but one were baptized into Christ. That one was my mother's oldest brother, who married a woman. He had been baptized into Christ, but he married a woman and joined the Methodist Church. And I had at least one aunt who used to tell me, oh, yeah, he joined the Methodist Church, but he don't believe that. Really? Well, he's fellowshipping them. He's in the Methodist Church. How many brethren are there among us today? And you look out in those churches like Forest Hill, like the one in Elk City I'm talking about. And you say, oh, well, they may be there, but they don't go along with that. Oh, they don't? Then they need to get out. The Lord says, come ye out from among them and be ye separate. The Lord says, have no fellowship with the unfruitful works of error, but rather rebuke them. Unfruitful works of darkness, but rather rebuke them. So if you're going to stay there, you either rebuke them or get out. And if you don't rebuke them and you don't get out, you become one of them. And your garments are soiled. Period. Sardis was what, I guess you could call it, in our day it would be called a moderate church. Where they wanted balanced preaching. They don't teach error, but they don't rebuke it either. Moderate churches take a neutral position in the fight against error. They don't necessarily promote it, error, but they don't take a stand against error. Moderate churches are like Meroz. You probably know what Meroz is. It was a city in the Old Testament. It's mentioned one time. Mentioned in the book of Judges, Judges chapter 5, verse 23, in the song of Deborah and Barak, which celebrated their victory over Sisera. And Meroz is mentioned in the song of victory. In Judges 5:23, it says, curse ye Meroz, saith the Lord, the angel of the Lord. Curse ye bitterly the inhabitants thereof, because they came not to the help of the Lord. To the help of the Lord against the mighty. The only mention of Meroz in the Old Testament. One verse, and it's a curse. Why? They didn't come to help the Lord in his cause. They kept quiet, like moderate churches do today. And those moderate churches, of course, will suffer the same fate. They'll be cursed. Faithful members of churches which will not strengthen the things that remain are duty bound to sever their fellowship with those churches. Don't stay in a church, and don't lie to yourself and stay in a church and say, I don't go along with what they're doing here. I don't believe this, but I'm not moving. Because you're just deceiving yourself when you do that. Sardis had worked. Sardis had been a working church. But the Lord said, I've not found thy works perfect before God. They had a big front. They had big programs. They had their food giveaway, and they had their clothes giveaway, and this giveaway, and that giveaway. And brethren, those of you especially who are preachers who will be in your study and your phone rings or somebody knocks at the door and they say, I'm going through and I'm here in Denison, Texas, along the Red River, and on my way to California, and we came from Montana, and we just need some help. So we came down from Montana on our way to California. People think And you know there's a lot of brethren who think that the church is just Christ died for a soup kitchen. And most people in the world think, because of the social gospel and the denominational world, and what a lot of our brethren have done, that we're here just to give people a handout. We just don't give handouts. We'll give them a voucher for some gas if we think they're worthy, and we'll give them a voucher for some food at the local grocery store, but we don't give them money. And we don't even do that very often. The church is not a soup kitchen. The Lord didn't die for a soup kitchen. The Lord didn't die for a school of preaching. The Lord didn't shed his blood for a college. The Lord did not shed his blood for a camp. The Lord did not shed his blood for a school. The Lord shed his blood for his church, in which he gathers the redeemed, and which he will save. Ephesians 5:23. That's what the church is. It's not to create big programs. Has a big front, big programs before men, but he said it's not perfect. I've not found thy works perfect. You've worked, but they're not perfect. They're not complete. That's what the word perfect means. In 2 Timothy 3:16 and 17, Paul said, all Scripture given by the inspiration of God, that the man of God may be perfect, thoroughly furnished unto all good works. The man of God may be perfect means he may be complete. It completely furnishes him unto all good works. And that's what he's talking about here. We need to lay aside those unauthorized projects. The Church of Christ Disaster Relief Effort. You've heard of that CCDRE. Oh, they love that alphabetical stuff, those acronyms. And you'd think the Lord died for A, B, C, D, E, F, G. CCDRE. Over in our country, it's QMCC. That's Quartz Mountain Christian Camp. There's nothing wrong with having a camp. Bruce knows that. You brethren know that. Nothing wrong with a camp run by Christians teaching the Bible. But when it's called a Christian camp, as it is in our part of the country, and churches put it in their budget, they're supporting something that the Lord didn't die for. Their works may be big, but they're not complete. Well, I guess you will stand up here and plant one foot in the sea and one in the earth and say, time shall be no more. Okay. Let's hurry. I only got down to the third verse. He said, hold fast. Repent. Watch. Verse 3. Verses 3 and 4, actually. They asked a few names even in Sardis that would not defile their garments. They had forgotten their beginning. They needed to go back. That's what we need to do today. That's what these big churches that are with their big programs need to do today. They need to go back to the beginning. They need to return to the old paths. They need to heed Jeremiah's call, stand ye in the ways and see and ask for the old paths. Where is the good way and walk therein? Jeremiah 6:16. We need to do that. Men like Cled Wallace, Foy Wallace, J.D. Tant, Foy Smith, others who preached the old Jerusalem gospel in years past would not even recognize the church today in many places. And they would certainly have no fellowship with them, what's called the church. Jesus said, I'll come on thee as a thief. He won't come sneaking. He'll come unexpectedly. A thief sneaks, but a thief also comes unexpectedly. Jesus is not going to sneak up on them. He's going to come unexpectedly. While many churches go their merry way preaching public relations instead of the gospel, and by the way, I had an elder at Elk City tell me that one brochure they put out was simply for public relations. While they're doing that, Instead of preaching the gospel, they're blind to the coming judgment according to the word of God. Jesus said, he that rejecteth me and receiveth not my word hath one that judgeth him. The word that I have spoken, the same shall judge him in the last day. John 12:48. We won't be judged by our size. We won't be judged by big name. We won't be judged by how many programs we had. We won't be judged by how many cute slogans we put out in front of the building. We won't be judged by how much religious jewelry we wore. We'll be judged by the word of God. That's what Jesus said. Matthew 12:48. Jesus said, he that overcometh, I'll not blot out his name. You've got some people there in Sardis that need to overcome. You need to keep your garments undefiled. Verse 5, he said, I'll not blot out his name. Thou hast a few that haven't defiled the garments. I'll not blot out his name out of the book of life, but I'll confess his name before my Father and before his angels. White raiment, metaphor for purity of life. The confession in verse 5, by the way, is coupled with repentance. Walking in the light. He that hath an ear, let him hear. Same message to all the churches. Then and now, teach and practice the same thing. To hear is to understand. Matthew 13:15. Sardis was all but dead, but had some salt in it that could save it. Same is true today. Churches involve themselves in secular and civil pursuits today in the social gospel of the here and now. They're concerned about the social gospel. Only those who still remain true to God's word that are still in those churches can pull them back. But if they can't, they need to get out. They need to get out. We need to return to the Jerusalem gospel. Leave the babble of denominational practices, denominational division, and denominational confusion behind. Get rid of this pulpit minister business. Give that back to the denominations where that language of Ashdod came from. Senior minister, youth minister, my church, our church. Language of Ashdod. But I hear it all the time.